No, we already clapped for him, but let's do it again. Let's give a warm welcome to Justin Gravitt.
Thank you. I like you guys better than the last service already. They didn't clap. They didn't clap for me. Hey, I'm really excited to be with you. Like Casey said, I've been associated in some way with this church for about 10 years, and my role professionally and vocationally is I'm part of Navigators Church Ministries, and so I help pastors and church leaders develop disciples and develop disciple-making cultures in their churches. And so part of, actually initially, that's how I connected here with Pastor Dave, and it's been a great journey. And even though I'm in different churches at different times, sharing and just being a part and observing the culture, it's always kind of special for me to be here with you. Because over those years, I've not just been helping leaders, I've also made connections and friendships with many of you. And so I'm always glad to be here. I'm always excited to be here just to see you guys and to connect. It's always when Dave's gone, which I'm trying to figure that out, but it's filling in for him. He is on sabbatical, and so he is recharging and reconnecting with God in a new and deeper way so that he can continue to invest here. And I've been following along with the sermon series that you guys have been in, How Jesus Changed the World. And I love the sermon series, one, because it's all about disciple making. And what I am passionate about is making disciples who make disciples and doing it the way that Jesus did. And so this series where you guys have been moving through this illustration, the prism illustration, I always have to enunciate that really well because I don't want people to think it's a prison illustration, like that's not as fun or cheerful, right? But prism illustration, and I don't think Dave mentioned this because this is not the type of guy that Dave is, but Dave made this illustration. So he thought it up, he concocted it. He told me it came to him while he was on the beach one day. And so, wherever he is today, who knows what God is bringing into his mind that might be useful to us and to others when he gets back. But I thought about we could do a quiz, like what is each of these letters like? And you guys could call them out, but I didn't want to put you guys on the spot. But I want to walk through with you the prism illustration and what you guys have been in over the past 5 weeks. Right, and we'll do it briefly, but the P is personal. And so disciple making is personal. What Jesus did, he did it personally. That means it was life on life. He didn't just roll out a program or a curriculum and say, hey, let's go through this book, and you go through this book. No, he was walking with them and living life with them in such a way that they knew he really cared about them and that he wanted them to become like him so that they could all be more aligned with God and his purposes in the world. And so that's the P, right? The R is reproducible. And so disciple making is meant to move beyond the person that you're investing in. And so if you're a disciple maker, like you're caring and thinking about not just that person, but the people that person is going to invest in later on. Disciple making is meant to multiply, right? It's not addition, it's multiplication. And it was really Jesus' way of reaching the world that continues to spread today. And obviously it's working, and it worked, right? We're here 2,000 years later talking about Jesus and what he did, in part because of how he did it. So the R is reproducible. The I, intentional. Jesus had a purpose in what he was doing and how he did it. He didn't just do it haphazardly. He didn't not have a plan. He had a very specific plan, even from the beginning. If you look at how he invited the disciples into relationship with him, he said, come follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. He had the plan for them. He didn't say, come follow me, and I will help you accomplish your goals. He didn't say, follow me, and I will make you better at your vocation. I'll mentor you. He didn't say that. Right? He had an intentional plan for them about what it meant to be a disciple, and that included making other disciples. Okay, so that is the I. The S is sacrificial. So disciple making is sacrificial. Disciple making is hard that's a common phrase that I hear a lot. Man, disciple making is so hard. And it is in some ways, but probably not in the ways that you think. Most people think that disciple making is really hard because we don't know enough, or we feel like we don't know enough. And so I don't know if I'm ready for this. It's too hard for me. But that's not really the type of hard that it is. The type of hard that it typically is it runs right through your weakness as a person. And so whatever that weakness is, if that weakness is being structured, if that weakness is being transparent about who you are, sharing some of the things that you have a hard time with in life, it'll run right through it. And at that point in time, that's when we really have to decide, are we willing to lay it all at the cross and say, I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to move through this hard thing and this hard time because it's worth it. And it's what Jesus calls us to. So that's the S. And then finally, the M, missional. As Tony shared last week, disciple making must be missional. And what that means is essentially disciple making needs to get out of the church to the lost. Disciple making is meant to reach lost people. And what I call the great bottleneck of disciple making in today's world is reaching those who don't yet know Jesus. You know, it's not an easy step, but it's an easier step for most people to connect with others who are already in the kingdom and begin to help them grow and to help them come to a place of maturity than it is to effectively engage those who don't yet know Jesus. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we move forward today. But as you can imagine, I'm super excited. I didn't binge watch the series, just to be honest with you, but I did follow along. And I'm excited about it because it is all about disciple making, but it's not the only reason I'm excited about this series. I've been excited about the series because it has this word changed in it. And I love the word change, and all of us love change, right? It's just common knowledge that people in the world love change. See, you're laughing. I don't know why you're laughing. People don't love change? You see, I'm in an active debate with others who are in Navigators Church Ministries, people that do what I do in other parts of the country, and they're convinced that people don't like change. In fact, they tell me, hey, Justin, you need to not use the word change so much when you're talking with pastors or church leaders because people really don't like it, and they might be like, well, you know, you're telling us we're doing something wrong and you want us to change it. And it would just be better, Justin, if you would use the word build or grow. Like, couldn't we build disciple-making cultures or grow disciple-making cultures? I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, I thought about it, and I've considered it, and I see part of their point. Like, you know, it's a bit of a nicer word, like grow or build, but it doesn't carry the same weight as change. And I'm kind of different than them, and maybe some of you that were laughing, like, I really believe people like change. I believe people think they don't like change, but they really do. And I have two reasons I wanted to submit to you to try to change your mind that people do like change. The first reason that I believe this is New Year's resolutions. Has everybody here at some point in their life made a New Year's resolution? I think almost everybody, except for those that didn't want to raise their hand. That's okay. So, New Year's resolution shows us that we like change. Change is a hope-filled word. Change moves us from here to there. Now, I don't make New Year's resolutions, but I have in the past, and I don't make them anymore. And why I don't make them anymore is because the New Year's resolution didn't work. It's not because I don't like change. It's because I get to that place when I'm trying to get to the change that it just doesn't make it. And so then I'm like, well, I don't know about those resolutions anymore. I take it year by year, to be honest with you. My second reason that I really believe that people love change are stories. Humans are hardwired for stories. When people tell stories, like people up at the front, like myself right now, if I'm telling you information, you're kind of listening. But if I start on a story, if I start telling you about what happened last month when we got in the car and we went down the highway and then we saw this other car that was chasing another one, none of this actually happened. Your mind's tuned in a different way because we're hardwired for stories. But every story has to have change. If it doesn't have change, it's not a story. You've never heard a good story that was like Zach sat in the front row. Not a story. Statement of fact, right? Now, facts are fine, but they're different from stories. Stories have change as a part of them. And we love change. People love change because they want to get from here to there. Now, why do we have this idea that people don't like change in the culture? I think there's some realities about why this is. One is we don't like the cost of change. We don't like how expensive change can be for us. We see the there that we want to get to, and we're here, and in between, there's normally a cost. And sometimes we know exactly what that cost is, and other times we don't. And when we don't know, we resist that change. We don't want it. And the second reason is kind of similar. It's like uncertainty. If we're uncertain of what's on the other side of change, then we resist change. Because we're like, well, I don't know. Like, that seems like maybe that there is okay, but I don't know what's over there after I'm there. And so I'm not sure I want to do that. And the number one reason people don't like change is when it's forced on them. People don't like change when it's forced on them. But Jesus changed the world, and you guys just spent 5 weeks looking at how he did it. And I want to ask you this question this morning. Can God change you? Can Jesus change you? This is kind of a silly question in one sense, right? Like, I'm asking you if God can change you. Like, this is the God that moved heaven and earth. This is the God that created everything in 6 days. And here somebody's like, can God change you? Well, of course. God can do anything. And from that standpoint, it's kind of a silly question. But if we look at it from another direction, can God change you? Meaning, are you allowing him? Are you open to God changing you? Now it's not so silly. Because some people, we get into a place of comfort and satisfaction. Sometimes we're satisfied in the right things. Sometimes we're satisfied in the wrong things. But if we're satisfied, we're not that open to change. We don't want to go there. We're happy right here. And so the question is, can God change you? Do you see something in you that you would like him to change? Here's what I believe about Christ followers. I believe that when we follow him, change follows us. When we follow him, change follows us. And if it's not following you, there's an issue. Because part of the change process that the scriptures talk about, we've termed sanctification, right? This really fancy word, which essentially means God changing you to be more and more like him. But the other image that I have, and it's one of my favorite images of what it looks like to be a follower of Jesus, is to have a wake of restoration that comes behind me. And so as I move through life as a follower of Jesus, the people that I touch, the places that I am, are better after I'm there than before. Our neighbors are currently moving out, which means soon we're going to have new neighbors moving in, and I'm already praying for who those people are. And I'm thinking about, man, they don't know yet, but God knows who they are. I don't know who they are, but I know that God is calling us as a family to somehow engage them. And my hope and prayer is that the change that will come through our relationship will be a wake of restoration in those people's lives. Well, this morning, I'm going to try and convince you of change as we continue. And we're going to look at a scripture that is really about change. It's a micro story. And it's out of the book of Matthew, and it's Matthew 13, and it's two individuals who were changed. Now, I need to set up the context of this passage a little bit for you. We're about 1.5 years into Jesus' ministry, and Jesus is continuing to teach and train the 12 and others, and as he's teaching and training, there's becoming more and more pressure, more and more resistance from leaders who are a part of that culture, the Pharisees and the scribes. And so this particular chapter is a lot about Jesus teaching on the kingdom of heaven, and he's starting to change his tactics a little bit in terms of how he's teaching. And part of what he's changing is the way he's communicating, and he's communicating more and more in parables. And most of us are familiar with parables, but we may not be familiar with why Jesus uses parables. You know, initially it's easy to think, like, because we remember them. So he's like, well, Jesus must be doing this because it makes it easier for people to remember those scriptures or those stories, those parables. And that's not exactly the case. So we're going to be looking at Matthew 13, 44 through 46. But before we get there, let's look at a scripture, Matthew 13, 10 through 14, where the disciples, this is right after Jesus has taught in a large crowd, and he's teaching in parables, and his disciples come and they're like, why are you doing this? Why are you teaching in parables? So this is what it says. The disciples came to him and asked, why do you speak to the people in parables? He, being Jesus, replied, because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. He continues on. Whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. This is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. What Jesus is explaining to his disciples is that he's starting to speak in parables because there's these people who are on the outside who are bringing resistance and trying to trap Jesus. And he is teaching in such a way so that those who are part of the kingdom will hear and understand, and those who are not will not. So it's not for clarity. In fact, it's to kind of separate. It's to keep some people in the dark and let other people understand. And it reminds me a little bit of what I did on the baseball field yesterday. So my son is almost 9 years old. He's just learning how to pitch. And I get a little intense at the baseball field because I really don't like losing. And so when my son's pitching, I have gone ahead and taught him some words. We used to live and minister in Thailand, and so I speak Thai as well. And so I've taught my son some words in Thai so that I can talk to him without anyone else understanding. And so, for instance, like this league, it's 9-year-olds, okay? So there's some guys that go up and they take a bat, but they don't need a bat. They have no intention of using that bat. They're walking up there hoping and praying that there's going to be 4 balls and they can get a walk. Now, it's me to be able to communicate to my son, hey, this guy is not going to swing the bat. But I learned years ago that if I say that out loud a lot, the other team really doesn't appreciate that. And so I've changed my tactics. So now I use some words in Thai to let my son know, hey, this guy is not going to swing, just throw strikes. Similar to what Jesus is doing here, right, in the parables. Okay, so our parables that we're going to look at, again, Matthew 13, 44 through 46. And they say this. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again. And then in his joy, went and sold all he had and bought that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and bought it. Little micro stories, aren't they? There's change in these stories. But I got to tell you, if I was with Jesus, I would be a little frustrated and I would have lots of questions. I'd be like, Jesus, give me more here. Like, who was this guy in the field? Like, was it his first time in the field, or is that like something that he's in there every day because he's a worker? Like, did he know the guy that owned the field? Were they friends? Was it a boss? And this merchant guy, Jesus, like, was that his job to go around and like look for pearls of great value? Or was it more like a hobby? You know, like the people that go to garage sales and they try to find a treasure that's buried among all the trash. You heard about those people? I mean, I've heard of people that have found a painting that's for $2 and they find out it's a $2 million painting. Like, is that the kind of situation we have here, Jesus? And Jesus, okay, so I get it. They both find a treasure and they sell everything they had. And now they have the treasure. But then what? Is it happily ever after? Was the merchant's wife and family like shocked and scandalized when they went home and the home is gone, but they got the pearl? Like, how did that conversation go? So many questions. But we don't know. And one of the great things about a parable is there's room for us to try to understand and to look a little more closely and to try to understand what is it that Jesus is trying to communicate. All those questions that I just mentioned, I think some of them might be important, but they weren't important for what Jesus was trying to communicate. See, Jesus was trying to communicate about the kingdom of heaven, one of his favorite topics to teach on. And if you look at the difference in these two parables, one of the differences is at first, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. Okay, kingdom, like treasure hidden. Got it. And then the other one, the kingdom of heaven is like a man searching for a pearl. Okay, so the kingdom of heaven is like someone searching. So even though they're kind of similar, like he's making a point that's a little bit different here at the beginning, one like a treasure, one like someone searching, okay? So then we have that, and then they find the treasure, but they find it differently. The guy in the field stumbles on it. Right? We have no indication that he was looking for a treasure in the field. In fact, it's probable that he is a worker in that field. And just like in our day and time, in their day and time, if you found something on someone else's property, whether it was on the top or 6 feet down or whatever, it belongs to the person that owns that field. Okay? Guy found it, hides it again. In his joy, goes, sells everything he has so he can buy it. But he found it on accident. Now the merchant was looking already, looking around for a pearl of great price. Finally, he finds one. He finds one, sells everything he has. Presumably there's some joy, although the parable doesn't say that. Presumably there's some joy that he found it. And then he sells everything he has so he can buy that pearl. Question I have for you this morning is, what's the treasure? What is the treasure? One of the things I love about studying the Word of God is that we're studying the same scriptures that Christians for over 2,000 years have studied. And so it's interesting to me to look back and to see, well, over time, what have people believed about this scripture? And over the course of time, there's 3 primary interpretations of what the treasure is. The first one is that the treasure is Jesus. And that makes sense, right? Like if you're in church, Jesus is normally the answer. But Jesus, when we see these 2 guys, like one of them stumbles upon Jesus, and for some of us, that's our way into the kingdom. We weren't looking for him. We weren't trying to find him, but in some way he interrupted us, or he intersected the path that we were on. And in our joy, once we found him, we knew, wow, this is what I've needed. And we leave everything else behind, and we submit ourselves to him and begin to follow him. And others of us, it's like the merchant. Like we have made a mess of our life, and we're searching and looking. God, I know you're out there somewhere. I just don't know where. God, would you help? And then we encounter Jesus and find him. In a similar way, we leave everything behind to follow him. We sell it all. And so Jesus makes sense, right? I can see why we get to that as a treasure. The second interpretation is that treasure is salvation. Really closely related, right, to that Jesus, that first thing that we just looked at. But salvation isn't just encountering Jesus. It's understanding what he did for us on the cross and understanding the freedom that now we can live in our lives because of what he has done. We no longer have to be burdened by sin. We no longer have to be locked and enslaved in sin. In fact, if you're here this morning and you don't know Jesus and you don't know salvation, I can guarantee you know sin, right? None of us are people that don't know about sin. And if you're feeling enslaved to sin, if you're feeling trapped by sin, the way out is through Jesus. Salvation, the saving part, that word salvation comes from saving. The saving part of that is Jesus died on the cross for your sins so that you don't have to be in chains to it. You can live a life of freedom and purpose. If you don't know him, I'm glad you're here this morning. If you don't know him, I encourage you to find someone who does and ask. I encourage you to talk to somebody that you have seen there's a difference in their life and start asking questions. And can you help me to know him the way that you do? I know for me, early on in my life, when I encountered people that knew Jesus, I was like, I don't have that, but I want that. So salvation is the second common interpretation over the ages. The third one was a little bit surprising for me. Because honestly, when I read these parables, I didn't think of this and I didn't process it that way. But as I looked at it a little closer, I was like, okay, that makes sense. The third interpretation is that it's you. You are the treasure. And it's like, well, wait a second, that sounds boastful. Like I'm the treasure? Like I don't know about that. But as we think about you being the treasure, the person searching is Jesus. The person searching is God. And we know that to be true as believers because we know the story of Christ coming at Christmas, right? He broke through. He came into our world and our reality, took on the nature of a human being because he was searching and looking for us. He was trying to rescue us, trying to find us. Now, it's not that one of these is more true than any of the others. You know, the nice thing about a parable is there's no one true interpretation, but we can learn a lot through each of these interpretations. But one commonality that we have there is that there is change, and that Jesus is worth the change that we see. You see, when we follow him, change follows us. When we follow him, change follows us. How has God changed you? Another question could be, how is God changing you? Well, I want to share some things from my perspective. As I shared earlier, I've been connected to this congregation in some way for about 10 years. And I see God changing you. I see God changing you corporately, which means he's changing you individually as well. What are some of the things that I see and I'm excited about? First one, Pastor Dave mentioned it a couple weeks ago in his sermon on intentionality. He said that through the survey, he learned that out of the people that call Centerville Grace their home, 44% are engaged in disciple-making relationships. That's amazing. And I don't know if a lot of us in the room have context for what that number means, but I work with churches all over Dayton. I'm connected to churches all over America. And churches that I'm connected with are focused or in process in some way, moving towards disciple-making and disciple-making cultures. 44% is among the leaders in the nation. Certainly is leading in Dayton. That's awesome. Praise God for what he's done and is doing, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. When I met Pastor Dave 10 years ago and I started talking to him about developing a disciple-making culture, at best, there was a few percent. It was close to zero here. And I told him, well, we need to get to somewhere between 15 and 18%. And I said that percentage because with culture change experts, whether it's secular culture change or within the church, that number represents where the culture shifts and it becomes a hallmark of the culture. So if you can get there, it will continue to grow as long as you don't lose focus, right? And so 44% is amazing, and I know it's continuing to increase. Another thing I'm really excited about here is that because of the culture that's being established, other churches around Dayton are looking at Centerville Grace for cues. They're looking at Centerville Grace for how can we do this? Back in 2018, myself, Pastor Dave, and Pastor Tony, along with another area pastor, founded a network called the Dayton Disciple Makers Network. We meet once a month, and what we do is we look at disciple making and how it's going in the churches that we're in, and most of the people there are in leadership in a church or at least deeply committed to disciple making in their church. And what's happening now in our meetings is people are always going back to Dave and one other pastor in the area because it's known that this congregation is ahead when it comes to disciple making. That's really, really cool. Another thing that's true here is that the core team here is an exemplar core team. Core team means a team of everyday people who are leading in disciple making for their church. And so the core team that's here is doing an excellent job at bringing focus and energy to disciple making for this congregation. And they're doing such a great job that other churches, again, are asking Dave, hey, tell us about your core team. How is this happening? All these sorts of things. That's really fun. Now, one of the things that the Dayton Disciple Makers Network does once a year is that we invite only people in a disciple-making relationship to a night of training and development. And we have different workshops that are available for them, normally around 4 workshops. And because of how things are going here, a few of the everyday disciple makers in this congregation were invited to lead a workshop at that equipped event. They've done it twice now, and they've done an excellent job. And so Caroline and Krista and Suzanne, a shout out to them because they have done that workshop and gotten rave reviews because they've done such an excellent job in that. So really cool stuff, right? But I want to say all these things, but I'm realizing that most of you are like, okay, well, that's good. Like 44% of you are in disciple making, but there's another however many percent, I don't do public math, right? You do that in your head. Whatever other percent is not yet in that. So, okay, Justin, so what? Well, I go back to the question, right? Are you willing to let God change you? And I want to share some other stories from other congregations in the Dayton area, actual people, I know them, these things have happened, that might apply to where you are today. The first one is my friend John. John's a guy who is an engineer, and he's heard about disciple making in his congregation, and his pastor was trying to get him involved, and he wasn't that interested. And honestly, he started to get a little bit annoyed that they were talking about disciple making so much. But his pastor said, hey, John, would you just pray about becoming a disciple maker? Would you pray about doing this with someone else? Because John was very mature in his faith in lots of other ways. And John kind of nodded. He's like, all right. And so pastor comes back to John a couple weeks later. John, how's that going? And John, I didn't do it. He's like, John, couldn't you do it? Like you told me you do it. Would you do it? Okay. John, back again. Pastor's like, John, did you do it? John said, well, sort of. And pastor, I don't know how this works, sort of. And John says, well, I didn't exactly pray that whether I should be a disciple maker or not, but what I prayed was that God would help me want to. How would you help me want to? My suspicion is there's people here today that just don't want to. And if that's where you are this morning, I would invite you and ask you, would you at least go before God and start praying and asking him, would you help me want to? Would you give me a desire to even want to pray for that? Well, the rest of John's story is John did start praying that. And God gave him some want to. And then he started praying that God would help him become a disciple maker. And now John is discipling. And the person that he's discipling is now discipling. And John says he wished he hadn't waited so long. Pretty cool. Another person, her name is Jane. Jane, again, another area church. In another area church. She's not a church by herself. In another area, in a church. And Jane is close to 60 years old. She's a school teacher. And similarly, she wasn't sure about the disciple-making thing. She wasn't sure she could do it. She didn't have the confidence for that. She didn't see herself that way. And so the other thing that was an obstacle for her, she just didn't have time. She didn't have a lot of time. She wasn't sure she wanted to do it. She wasn't sure she was ready or that God would even want her to do it. And so what she decided to do was she was just going to make time. And she did something a little unconventional. She just started to quit everything. And so she was real involved in the church. Like she quit worship team. She quit life group. She quit the women's stuff she was doing. And the pastor starts hearing this and he's calling me. He's like, Justin, Jane's like quitting everything. Like, is this normal? Like, is this going to start happening everywhere? I was like, no, this is unusual. Like, let's just see what happens. Let's see how this plays out. As Jane recalls the story, she says, I quit everything and I went home. And I sat down and I just prayed to God. All right, God, now I have time. If you want me to disciple somebody, show me where to start. Goes to church the very next Sunday. After the service, a young woman comes up to her that she'd talked to probably twice in her whole life. The young woman says, hey, I don't know if you do this sort of thing, but I was really hoping someone would disciple me, and God brought you to my mind. And would you be willing to do that? And of course, Jane is like, yes, right? When she tells that story now, she tells it through tears. Because for Jane sees the intersection between her obedience and God blessing that. And now she's a disciple maker, and she's seeing lives change as a result of her investment. Neither of those people have a seminary degree. Neither of those people are professionals in ministry. They're just everyday people that said, God, I hear a lot about this. Would you use me? Or would you allow me to have some want to towards that if you want me to do it? I'll tell one more story because I like you better. I didn't tell first service this story. There's a couple, young couple, again, local church, young couple with 2 young kids. Guy was an AI engineer. He had like tons of letters behind his name. The woman was a teacher. And they just started to disciple. And I was walking with them and trying to help them with that. And the last conversation I had with them in person, I was in their home helping them pack up. And they looked at me in the middle of this and they said, Justin, this is all your fault. And I was like, I'm not taking that. Like, I think Jesus did this, not me. Well, they were packing up because they were moving. They said, Justin, before we met you, before we started to engage with disciple making, we were all about the American dream. We were trying to get more. We had our 2 kids. We were really excited about life in the suburbs and moving up in our careers. But then you interrupted. And I was like, Jesus again, it's Jesus. And now we see the value of the kingdom. They found the treasure. They found what the kingdom of heaven is intended for. Life in the kingdom is intended to be lived forward into people's lives, investing. They were moving from Dayton down to North Carolina. North Carolina, they didn't decide, let's go to North Carolina. What they decided was, God is calling us to reach Indian people. And he put Indian people on their heart. And he said, I want you to reach them. And so they took a trip overseas to India, and it just didn't seem like a fit for them. And so I was processing with them, and I said, listen, there's a lot of Indian people in America. I said, why don't you look around and see where there's a hub of Indian people? Turns out one of the biggest ones, or maybe the biggest one, is in Cary, North Carolina. Packed up their family, moved into a suburb, a neighborhood where they were the only white people in the neighborhood. They're missionaries in Cary, North Carolina. It's pretty cool. Now, I don't lift them up as like that was any cooler than what Jane did or what John did. But I lift them up in this sense because disciple making must be missional. And the challenge that I have for you as a congregation is that we're doing great, 44% in a disciple making relationship. What we need more of is engaging the lost. What we need more of is seeing people who don't yet know Jesus, encountering him and coming into the kingdom and being a part of the church. As I mentioned earlier, it's the bottleneck of disciple making. But here's something I know about the harvest. The harvest trails sowing, right? We can't have a huge harvest if we don't plant many seeds. And so my challenge for you this morning is, as you're living out disciple making, as you're living out wherever you are, would you intentionally move towards lost people? Would you intentionally pray for them? Would you ask God to bring them into your path? Would you ask God for those non-Christians who are in Dayton who are calling out to him and who are asking for help, that they would somehow encounter you and that you would have your antenna up so that you would know when you're encountering them and move with confidence and clarity into their life? It's not easy. But as we've said before, when we follow him, change follows us. And I see this wake of restoration that's already happening here. I'm really excited for you. I'm really excited for what's happening here and what's going to continue to happen here. I want to pray for you as the band comes up, and we'll continue to worship with our songs. Lord Jesus, I thank you. Thank you that you are a God who treasures us, who seeks us out, who chases us. Father, I thank you that you are worth everything. Everything that we